Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 21st, 2017. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, it's the annual Brewing Disasters show. Steve Wilkes and I get together to read tales of brewing woe from you listeners over the past year. We'll cringe, laugh, and maybe learn something to prevent future disasters from happening. Maybe. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, our DVDs, our brewers' logbooks, and other Basic Brewing gear. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. If you'd do us a favor of rating us on iTunes and maybe leaving a nice comment, that'll help new listeners find us, or at least that's what they tell us. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. I got an email from Erwin in Denmark. I had referred to PayPal subscribers who have been with us for a long time as legacy subscribers. Erwin says, as a PayPal subscriber working in IT, I don't like to be called legacy. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe I should call them founding subscribers? Anyway, Erwin asked if he should switch from PayPal to Patreon, and I said that there are some advantages, for me at least, going through Patreon. So Erwin checked it out, and remember, he's in Denmark. He said, I went through Patreon sign-up and had a rather nasty surprise at the checkout counter. Patreon charges sales tax, which here is 25%. That's crazy. Is that just a Denmark thing? Anyway, if PayPal works better for you, then stick with that, and I will continue to be grateful for your support. Speaking of supporters, the holiday gift-giving season is right upon us. It's winding down, but there is still time. And what is the most foolproof gift for home brewers, especially last minute? Gift certificates. Now until the end of December, our sponsors Desiree and Dave of High Gravity in Tulsa are offering gift certificate bundles on HighGravityBrew.com. That's right, through the end of December, High Gravity is offering a bundling special on gift certificates. If you buy a $50 gift certificate, you'll get a second $5 one for free. If you buy a $100 certificate, you'll get a $10 one for free. And if you buy a $1,000 gift certificate, you'll get a $100 certificate bundled with it for free. That's through the end of December, so Santa still has time to take advantage of that. Check out HighGravityBrew.com for details. What can you buy with a $1,000 gift certificate? An electric brewing system that will make 2018 very happy indeed. As you well know, I love my high-gravity electric system with the Warthog controller. It really fits the way I brew. I know there are a lot of electric systems out there. Find your dream system at HighGravityBrew.com. We got a lot of stories to get to. Traditionally, the folks at Brew Hauler have sponsored the prizes for our disaster show, but Steve and I have decided to sponsor the prizes ourselves this year. Our shelves, too. So the prizes will come off our shelves. So if you hear your disaster letter, you'll be getting a prize grab bag from Steve's Brew Shop and Basic Brewing. Also, we made a joke about playing Disaster Show Bingo. So after I edited the interview portion, I said that'd be easy to do. So I went ahead and made that a reality. If you go to the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com or our Facebook page, I'll post a link to a Disaster Show Bingo card. It's got a 4x4 grid at the bottom, a blank 4x4 grid, and a list of common themes above it, like angry spouse, broken glass, bad puns from us, and leaky kegs. So you randomly put those into the squares, and when you hear them on the episode, you mark them off. I think you know how bingo works. Anyway, this will work for past Disaster Show episodes, too, if you want to go back and try it with them as well. And you can make up your own common themes that you hear on the disaster shows and put them in the squares. So let me know. Let me know what you think about that. So take a picture if you get a bingo. Take a picture and send it to me on Twitter, and I'll repost it on there. Enough of me talking. Let's go to a recording of more of me talking to Steve Wilkes on location at Steve's Brew Shop. Well, Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's our annual disaster show, and this is the first time we've ever recorded the show in the field.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're here in your office here in stevesbrewshop.com. And we are. I'm going to set my little timer here so I can say it's going to be a long show. I got to tell you, we got a lot of letters to cover, but we'll be off next week. So
that's right.
So if you get tired of listening, pause and listen to the rest next week.
That's right.
So you won't even miss us.
Buckle up, Buttercup. I don't know what that means.
Or I'll butter your necktie.
I'll butter your necktie.
It's from the movie Harvey. Cut the shenanigans or I'll butter your necktie.
So speaking of disasters.
Yes. Shall we move on? Well, let's start off with something that's not disastrous.
No.
This Tom Brennan from up in New Jersey coincidentally sent this beer that we're sipping on. This is his version of my fruitcake barley wine recipe. 10.1% alcohol, so we're not drinking a whole lot of it, but original gravity 1090, final gravity 1013. So boy, that yeast did a bang-up job. 91% two-row, 3% aromatic malt, 3% caramel 120, 3% brown sugar, 33 IBUs of nugget, USO5 yeast. And he added 5 ounces of molasses at 30 minutes, 16 ounces of dried pineapple at 10 minutes, 2.5 teaspoons each of cinnamon, ginger, clove, and nutmeg at 5 minutes. And then in secondary, he added 8 ounces of Bing cherries soaked in vodka. So what do you think of this beer?
I think it's very nice. It's just got that big stone fruit thing going. It's not hot, but I can tell it's a big beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a nice bitterness level too at the back end. It's very barley wine. It's supposed to be,
right.
But it's got that big. It's not a frou-frou beer.
No,
I guess that's where I was headed.
But it's very drinkable. It's it's not syrupy at all. It's nicely carbonated. Well done, Tom. But Tom also sent.
Did Tom have a?
Tom had a disaster story.
All right.
So here we go. Buckle up, Buttercup, or I'll butter your necktie. Okay. Tom says, one of my homebrew clubs, the Monmouth County Homebrew Association, decided to make a batch of Belgian Quad and age it in a Laird's Applejack barrel. Sounds like a great idea, right? After brewing nearly 100 beers, many of them Belgians, I thought this should be easy. Well, if you're reading this on the podcast, I think you know how this turned out. I decided to do my mash in my round cooler mash tun that I have outfitted with some quick disconnects hooked up with clear silicone tubing and into a pump. As I started to mash out, my pump started to make an odd noise. I took a look at my tubing. Who hasn't? And,
not me in many years. Gotta go on that diet.
I took a look at my tubing and noticed that it was filled with grain.
Oh.
My GFI tripped and my pump was clogged. While stirring my grain in the tun, I more than likely jostled loose the hose connection to my false bottom. What to do now? There are 11 other brewers counting on me to get this beer brewed and fermented to the numbers we all agreed upon. I ran inside, pulled out my brew in a bag, and dumped all 16 pounds of the wet grain along with 5 gallons of hot wort into my keggle. Oh, did I forget to mention that it was raining too? That one's on me since I didn't check the weather forecast, so I grabbed my trusty pop-up tent for cover on this already crummy day. My pre-boil gravity was a bit off too, but not bad considering what I had to go through to get this wort to the kettle. I managed to add some more fermentables to the boil to hit the mark we decided on for the barrel fill, all while taking my pump apart and cleaning out all that grain that got stuck in there. Fast forward 5 months, we're at our local homebrew shop, the Brewer's Apprentice in Freehold, New Jersey, on Packaging Day. The beer turned out great. A little aggressive apple flavor, but that will fade with age. Not terrible considering how things started out. So there you go. Could have been worse.
Could have been much worse.
Thanks, Tom. We have evidence that you are a good brewer other than that with this beer. Frank from Thurmont, Maryland said, and this is one that I received too late for last year's competition. It's an exhibition, as Letterman used to say. This is not a competition. It's an exhibition.
Yes.
Please, no wagering. Frank from Thurmont, Maryland says, it was the beginning of July and another hot, humid day in Maryland, so I decided to brew a 10-gallon batch of a nice, hoppy, refreshing IPA. I just got done making a few modifications to my setup and built a new whirlpool arm, so what better beer to try it on than an IPA? The brew day started out like any other, back and forth from the garage, the brewing space, to the basement, the grain and hop storage. It was a hot and humid morning. While grinding grain, I was sweating and soaked my shirt. I always like to give my brews a relevant name and often go back and forth to Beersmith, adjusting my recipe as I go. Due to the hot, sticky morning, I decided the perfect name for this brew would be Sticky Day IPA. Soon I would realize how true this name would ring. Things were going well with the strike water and mash was perfect. First gravity readings were looking good, and I dropped 3 ounces of Summit into the kettle for first wort addition. I decided this time I didn't need to use a hop bag because I would be whirlpooling and all that hop debris would move to the center of the kettle in a beautiful cone. Boy, was I wrong. As things progressed, I had a small boil over with sticky wort all down my kettle and burner. Oh well, it happens. Moving on, I continued to add my hop additions, most being toward the last 10 minutes of the boil, and started whirlpool. 4 ounces of Simcoe, 4 ounces of Cascade, and finally found 5 ounces of Falconer's Flight. Yes, if you were counting, that's a pound of the good stuff, all pellet hops, free-floating in the boil kettle. No big deal with my new whirlpool method, right? I attempted to whirlpool and cool at the same time. This took almost an hour to get to 80 degrees. I also noticed my wort wasn't moving much. Oh well, probably because this is 11 gallons of fluid. Wrong. So I started pumping wort to the fermenter, but noticed I had a trickle of flow. Well, as you get older, get used to that. Did I?
I'm carrying Flomax now.
In the shop?
In the shop, yeah, just for this issue.
Do you add that in the secondary?
That's right.
Did I mention I took off the strainer on my pickup tube in the boil kettle? Anyway, after 10 minutes of this trickle, I got frustrated, and I put on my brewing glove and dived into the brew kettle. Oh no, I had a bunch of hop debris clogging my dip tube, clearing it away. That did the trick. Globs of hops and wort shot into the fermenter, and I collected almost half a gallon, then back to a trickle. After cleaning with gloved hand twice and back to the same result, I decided to just pour the brew kettle into the fermenter. Well, that didn't work so well either. With nearly a gallon of wort on me, the floor, and the fermenter, ended up with about 9.5 gallons of wort. Fermentation went great and came out with a tasty beer, however. When kegging, I ended up spilling another half gallon or so of my precious IPA all over the basement floor. Sticky Day IPA indeed. Moral of the story, be careful what you name your brew. Thank you, Frank.
Wow.
Yeah, my son and I tried to pour wort from a keggle, from a converted keg cooker into a fermenter. And they're not designed to be poured from. They're not designed to be picked up and poured.
This time of year, Chris Kegel will come and visit you.
Kegel claws.
Yeah.
Better than Kegel claws, I guess.
That's right.
Alex, this is another story from last year that I misplaced. Alex says, I love your podcast and appreciate the reminder on the last couple episodes to send in the story I've been meaning to share. It's become a tradition for me to have a home brew or two while I'm brewing, but on this day, I perhaps had a couple too many. I was also nursing a glass of water, which usually helps things, but in this case made things worse. While boiling my batch, I was sanitizing my cold side equipment with Star San in a bucket. The boil was nearly over, so I grabbed the closest vessel in reach, which was a clean pint glass from the kitchen cupboard, and I poured in it and set it on the counter case, which I needed to sanitize in case I needed to sanitize something later. So he poured Star San into this pint glass.
Right.
Foreshadowing. I continued to sip my beer, hooked up my wort chiller to my sink, and added some hops at flameout. I realized I was thirsty from all the heat and reached back for the water I was nursing and chugged about half the pint. I put the glass down and thought to myself, it's strange that this water tastes sour like a lemon.
Oh, boy.
Then I realized I had just downed half a glass of industrial-grade sanitizing fluid and proceeded to panic. While supposedly food-safe, who knew what this stuff would do in significant quantities since it's designed to kill everything on the surfaces it touches? The first aid instructions on the Star San bottle said to call poison control and not to induce vomiting, and the words dodecylbenzosulfonic acid certainly didn't calm me down. I insisted on getting this caustic liquid out of my stomach at all costs and stuck my fingers down my throat to get the stuff out despite the instructions. Most of it came out. I managed to calm myself down and felt just fine for the rest of the evening. I found out from reading online that the reason it is dangerous to induce vomiting is because the chance of aspirating or breathing in the acid, which is much more dangerous than swallowing it. Alex says, cheers to dodecylbenzene sulfonic acid. Woo!
Wow.
Yeah, don't put your sanitizing solution in something that you might drink out of.
No kidding. You know, if you use Star San, vodka, and 7-Up, it's called a cleanup. You get a little ice, a twist, it's delicious.
Not recommended.
Not recommended.
Checks will not be on.
That's right.
Evan from Orange, California, he said, at this point I'd like to update you on the progress of the Beet cider. The cider was a little aggressive. I opened up my container and noticed a hissing noise accompanied by bubbles coming out of the top of the airlock at a rate of half a second. I took that time to try and relieve some pressure from the top, and I was greeted with beet juice shot directly into my eyes with a lot of force behind the spray. I gave up. I let it sit for another few weeks. I tried bottling it, broke the airlock, but that didn't stop me. I tried to get the bung and what's left of the airlock off. I sliced my finger.
Ew.
I picked up the whole 64-ounce container and dropped it in the trash. Successful bottling day indeed.
You know what he did wrong? He said beet juice 3 times.
I got that.
Yeah. You see what I did there?
I do see what you did there. RJ from Seattle. I wonder if his name is Raymond J. Johnson Jr.
Could be.
You could call him Ray. You can call him Jay. You can call him Johnny. You can call him Sonny. But he doesn't have to call him Johnson. Do you remember that reference?
Yes.
Okay. You just...
I can't remember the shtick, though.
The shtick was the guy, he was on the Red Fox's show there for a while, and Red Fox would say, hey, Mr. Johnson,
you can't call me Ray.
doesn't have to call me Johnson.
Right.
You can call me Ray, or you can call me Jay, or you can call me Johnny, or you can call me Sonny. Look it up on the internet.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's plenty.
That's all you need to hear.
RJ from Seattle. This past Christmas, as is tradition, I met with my entire extended family at my grandma's house for awkward conversation and exchange of lame gifts with family members we don't really know all that well.
Already sounds fun.
That's not worth over the river and through the woods. To my surprise, word had gotten around the family of my brewing addiction, leading to a great gift from my uncle, an all-grain Irish Red Ale recipe kit. Well, there you go. It got better.
Yeah.
The excitement set in for a few weeks from Christmas when I could invite my uncle over for a tasting of my brewing prowess. Come brew day, everything went according to plan until my plate chiller came into the equation. Turns out running hot water through the wort side of my chiller after using it each time had not been enough to keep it clean, and the increasingly slow flow rate lately had been from gunk building up inside the chiller. This time, however, I couldn't get wort to flow through the chiller at all. Now I was stuck trying to figure out how to cool down 5 gallons of hot wort without a chiller, while of course being quite a few beers deep through the day. What I should have done was simply taken my kettle into the bathtub and filled it up with cold water. Instead, I decided it would be a good idea just to transfer the hot wort directly into my glass carboy and leave it inside my fermentation chamber to cool it down.
Oh, boy.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
About 30 seconds into transferring the hot wort into my glass carboy, I heard a pop. I quickly scanned the surface of the carboy and didn't notice anything, so I kept about my brilliant plan. After filling the carboy, I walked it over to my fermentation chamber, set it to the 60 degrees, and closed the lid. To my drunken surprise, the temperature inside my chamber instantly shot way up, and humidity inside went off the charts. I opened the lid, pulled out the carboy, and shamefully carried it back to the kitchen, setting it in the sink so I could step away and think about things. After thinking for a couple minutes and refilling my beer, I walked back to the kitchen to find half of my batch had miraculously vanished from the carboy. Sure enough, there was a huge crack down the entire side, and the wort had leaked out, thankfully mostly in my sink. At this point, I simply accepted the loss and let the rest of the batch drain down the sink. While I lost a batch of beer and my glass carboy, I can't believe how lucky I was looking back at the story. No glass shards, no hospital trip, no 5 gallons of hot wort coating my carpet during the trips back and forth from the kitchen, in which case I would have just given up my security deposit and moved to a new department. Yeah. Sometimes it's better to cut your losses. Mm-hmm. And best of all, I ordered myself a SS Brewtech stainless conical that I've been in love with ever since. I still invite my uncle over for a tasting, but I think I'm going to avoid the Irish Red Ale kit from now on. Well, there you go. That's, oftentimes these stories, these disasters wind up in upgraded equipment at the end.
Yeah.
If you look at most of the carboys, if you look at the bottom of them, they say, don't put, not for boiling water or something like that. Yep. Matthias from Kalix, Sweden, a couple miles south of the Arctic Circle. And no, we don't have polar bears, if you're wondering. Were you wondering that?
I was, yeah. It's the first thing that flashed in my mind.
I'm going to take a sip of the
I appear to be out.
Uh-oh. There may be more in the bottle. It's a big metal bottle.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Matthias says, I'm a novice home brewer. I've only brewed a couple of batches, but I've read How to Brew from Start to Finish a couple of times. It's a big, long book.
No kidding.
Have a long checklist of everything that is needed before, during, and after the brew day. But what I know now is that experience is greater than preparedness. The brew day was coming along. I made my yeast starter yesterday, which was swirling away on my stir plate. I started to mash my grains, which is my thickest yet. After pouring in 5 kilograms, or 11 pounds, it started to have a porridge consistency. And I had 2.5 kilograms, or 5.5 pounds, to go. But I took my trusty stainless steel mash paddle and stirred it with one hand and poured with the other. Oh, crap! My electric brewing system almost tipped from stirring the thick solution, but I caught it. So I called for my wife to help me hold it while I stirred. After mashing for 75 minutes, I started to sparge. After lifting the grain basket, it was heavy with that grain and water. I bet.
Yeah.
After a few minutes, I noticed that the water was draining really slow. Is this what they call a stuck sparge? So after 2 hours, I collected my expected 27 liters, or 7 gallons of wort at 1085 gravity. So I set the temperature of my electric brew system, started the boil. In the meantime, I started to clean my fermenter, put my gloves and eye protection on that I always use, and cleaned it with Star San. Oh, crap. So it's the second oh, crap, if you're keeping track at home.
Yeah, it's a 2-holer.
Oh, crap, boil over. I grabbed my trusty stainless steel paddle again and started swatting at the angry foam. Where's my spray bottle? Crap, that's 3. I forgot it, so I called for my wife to get it on the kitchen counter while I stirred like a crazy person. Spray it and the foam started to subside. Crisis averted for now. I adjusted the power of the brew system to set a timer on it and got the expected boil. Who knew that a thick, dark beer has a tendency to boil more easily? After a while of boiling, I was getting tired, so I thought I would put on some coffee. Turned around from the boiling wort and grabbed the coffee container. That's strange. Why is it upside down? Best if I turn it around. Finally, ground coffee went all over the floor. The container was not upside down. The lid was on the bottom of the container. Called for my wife to watch the boiling wort while I vacuumed up the coffee from the floor. That was the last coffee we had at home, so no coffee for me. I added the hop additions and added brown sugar with cocoa powder. Then the boil was complete. I started the cooling process with my immersion chiller, poured the cooled wort into my fermenter. It was an easy pour because it stopped by itself. Then I pitched the yeast and shook the fermenter. I carried it from this kitchen down to the basement. The airlock was in a glass beaker with star sand. I took the airlock, whoops, it was slippery, dropped the airlock into the beaker, got splashed in the eyes with star sand. Why didn't I use the safety glasses like I always do? Then I ran up the basement stair into the bathroom and jumped into the shower. I stared into the shower head with my eyes open and started the water. People are going to think star sand is evil stuff.
No kidding.
While I was showering, I was thinking, I hope the wort didn't get infected. Don't want this pain to be nothing, or for nothing. So I called for my wife again to help me put the airlock on. After 20 minutes of eye showering, I got dressed and inspected the airlock. It looked great, thanks to my wife. So I turned to my cleanup to the in the kitchen. When I walked into the kitchen, I saw a large puddle of wort on the floor. Crap! What is this, 5 now? 4 or 5? I forgot to turn the ball valve off on the brewing system. I thought there was nothing left. After some cleaning and swabbing, the floor was clean-ish. A little sticky for now, but that would get a good cleaning tomorrow. When cleaning the spray bottle I used, I wondered why there were so many bubbles in there. Oh, crap! I used the one with the dish soap to spray the foam.
Oh!
So he did some research after listening to the toxicology shows with the Toxicology Paul, and he figured out that he would have to drink 73 gallons of beer per day to reach the harmful limit.
Well, I'd be in trouble.
So he said, after all that, he has a nice stout on the way. We'll steep a small amount of own roasted coffee beans in a couple of days. And a huge thanks to my wife. It would have been a greater disaster if not for her help. So now he says he uses a couple of different colored spray bottles, one for star sand, one for soap, and one for clean water. Thinking of naming the beer Burning Eye Wife Shout Stout.
I like it.
Thanks, Matthias.
Wow.
All right. Matt. Matt says, I decided to brew 2 beers for my kids' graduation party. One was a Belgian blonde, which was my first venture into brewing Belgian styles. The brew day went just fine. After pitching the yeast, I moved the carboy down into the cool basement bedroom on top of an old dresser. Foreshadowing. I rigged my standard blow-off tube, but decided to reuse the Tupperware container holding sanitizer instead of the larger bucket I usually use. About 2 days into fermentation, my wife texted me at work that the house smelled like beer, and I assured her it was just the smell from the Belgian yeast. When I got home, I noticed that the Tupperware container was full above the rim with foam from an active krausen. I didn't think much of it until I went to move something and realized all my equipment was glued to the dresser with a sticky film the same color as the dresser. After scrubbing all the goo off the top, I noticed that the stuff had flowed into a corner and down the side. It had swelled and split the chipboard side of the dresser so much I had to use a pry bar to get the drawer open. I mentioned to my wife there had been a little spillage, whereupon she informed me that the old dresser had sentimental value.
Oh, boy.
Over the next couple of nights, as my beer happily bubbled away, now with a bigger blow-off container, I found myself stealing down to try and repair the dresser. By chiseling, sanding, gluing, and clamping, I was able to get the dresser back into a usable state. The repair passed muster a few weeks later when my wife came downstairs and didn't notice anything amiss. The Belgian and amber beers I made for the party came out great, and the guests really enjoyed them, as evidenced by empty kegs. I still ferment on the same dresser, but now I have a plastic cover over it. Matt says, P.S. I would send pictures, but I didn't take any since I didn't want incriminating evidence lying around. So, secretive construction down in the basement.
Homebrewing will drive you to great lengths.
Bernard from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This all happened after a brew day on a Sunday. Monday morning came around and I went to work as normal. I had cleaned up the night before, but I did not throw away the grains in my grain bag. I brew in a bag, so my grains are usually crushed very finely, almost to a flour. My wife was out of town, so I decided to clean up my grains from the day before. I thought to myself, I'll just put the grains down the garbage disposal and make it easy.
Oh, yeah.
It was not easy.
No.
I started my escapade of throwing grains down the drain and running the disposal. Clogged. I grabbed what I could out of the kitchen sink and threw away the grains in the garbage. I still needed to get the disposal unclogged. I figured I would just try running some water and thin out the mess to unclog the disposal. I now have a sink full of water and finely crushed grains. I try running the disposal a couple of times and nothing is happening. I decided I will go and get the plunger and try to unclog the disposal and the sink. I started plunging. Nothing's happening, but I hear this faint hissing sound. Wondering what it is, I open the doors underneath the kitchen sink cabinet. I forgot that I had a pipe underneath my sink that was somewhat loose. This pipe then became fully detached from the pressure of the plunger. Not a big deal, just reattach the pipe and tighten. I still have a clogged sink. Plunge some more. This time the doors are open, watching for the pipe to malfunction. It did. The pressure from the plunger and the excess water shot out of the pipe and all over my kitchen floor. Thank God my wife was not home. How many times have we said that?
Yeah.
Thank God my wife was not home because this would have been the end of my home brewing career. I still had a clogged sink. I figured, might as well keep plunging and get everything out. I tried catching as much as I could in buckets, but grains and water were still splattering all over under the sink. The sink is no longer clogged, but now I have a huge mess in my kitchen. We keep out typical kitchen chemicals under the sink, as well as dishwasher supplies. Everything was covered. I took a couple of minutes to soak it all in. It was now 12 a.m. I work second shift, so I get home a little later than most. How am I going to clean all this up? I don't have a shop vac or anything that can lift wet grains. I started taking everything out of the cabinet, cleaned it all off, and set it aside. I found a sponge mop in our utility closet and started sopping up grains and water. Before I did this, I had to reattach the pipe and hope nothing would get clogged. So after 2 hours of soaking up wet grains and squeezing into a bucket and throwing the grains outside, it was finally 2 a.m. and everything was cleaned up. Needless to say, I should have just thrown the grains away in the garbage bag or compost pile. I'm not really too sure what I was thinking when I thought of this. So for small batches, I use the garbage disposal, but maybe I won't anymore.
Well, I know at our house you couldn't do that. And it wouldn't in my house. It wouldn't get stuck in the P-trap. There at the sink. It would get about 15 feet down the line, then it would get stuck.
Didn't you have a situation where you had like loose plumbing under your house and the output of your plumbing system was like in the crawl space of your house?
Yes, this has happened.
That's not a brewing disaster, that's a pooing disaster.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, when we cut the line about 100 feet down the sewer line, it was like, there she blows. 20 feet in the air. Oh, yeah.
Brown gold, Texas
Brown
tea.
gold. That's right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Niles from, would it be Stowe or Stowe, Massachusetts?
I don't know.
S-T-O-W.
I'd say Stowe, but I don't know.
I'll say Stowe. That
Okay.
way we'll get it right.
I'll say tomato. You say tomato.
That's right. Niles says, my wife knows how much I love beer, so she got me a 1-gallon all-grain kit for Christmas a few years ago. The jury is still out on if she regrets it or not, as I've expanded my setup and frequently look for great homebrew finds. I typically look for used items first and have found much success in this area, but alas, this is where our disaster begins. On one occasion, I purchased a 5-gallon black IPA extract kit along with some used equipment. Up until this point, I had been doing all-grain 1-gallon brewing, so it was time to up my brew pot and and try a new method. It can be painful to up your brew pot.
Yes, it can.
I thought most brewers start with extract and then move to all-grain. Going the other direction should be easier, right? I searched again, and to my joy, I found a larger brew pot and a cooler mash tun with a false bottom that I could use for larger all-grain batches to come. My son was under 1 at the time, and so I put the water on our electric stove top to come up to temperature. Decided to put him to bed and start the extract brew night, hoping to be done in just a few hours. After adding the extract and stirring, I started to notice a sizzling noise that coincided with a slight burning sugar smell and my brew pot shaking. I thought maybe there was some debris left in the oven or on the stove from cooking dinner, but when I lifted the brew pot, which was not an easy feat on itself, I noticed it was slowly dripping from the bottom.
Oh, boy.
No wonder this was this used equipment? No wonder. Mm-hmm. I sprang into action and grabbed as many pots as I could find to put my wort into. I now had to figure out when each pot would boil, parceling out the hops during the multiple boils, and cooling them down at different times. when it was time to put the wort into the one fermenter, thankfully, my volume had decreased to about half. What happened? Ah, right, 3 pots boiling off steam will greatly reduce your final volume. These are not the things I'm thinking of at 2 a.m. And again, 2 a.m.
Yeah. There's a theme this year.
Yeah, they don't happen in the middle of the day, these things.
Right.
I decided to just fill the rest of the fermenter with tap water, pitch the yeast, and call it a night. In the end, I also learned the valuable lesson that extract kits can have a pretty limited shelf life, and I didn't even bother to look at the date on the kit that I had acquired. The hops can only help cover up so much. I had a few bottles, but dumped most of it in the end. I'm glad that experience didn't dissuade me from brewing more, but just made me a smarter buyer and brewer. Things have been going well since then. Thanks, Niles. So inspect your equipment, or you should just buy used or brand new equipment,
Used
right?
stuff.
Right, Steve
It's
from
stevesbrewshop.com. I feel like an NFL,
color commentary.
That's right.
Oh, well, let's take a shift here in our beverage. What do we got here? This is a golden beverage that you brewed.
This is a Sizer. And we did a video on this. So this is my 3-gallon. We made this on September the 18th.
Now, was this the one that we started on my show or your channel?
I've forgotten.
I think it was it's called Starting a Sizer.
I think it's on my channel.
Okay.
I think the Mellow is on your channel.
Okay.
We did, for those of you paying attention, we shot 3 videos that day.
Yeah.
And I think this one was on my channel, but it's 3 gallons, 3-gallon batch. So apple cider, 24 ounces of light raw honey. I used Saft cider yeast, 9.17% alcohol. And the cool thing about this is
Didn't you rack it onto some apples?
I racked it onto 5 pounds of Crispin apples, which I lightly pureed in a food processor. So I kind of chunked them up.
You got to be careful you don't get the Crispin Glover apples.
That's right.
They're just crazy.
Yeah. It's nutso.
They got quite a kick. It's another Letterman reference.
So I left it on there for a while and put a little ginger on it when I bottled it. And I'm gonna leave the Marianne joke to Bob Stimsky.
It's delicious.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
It really is good. Yum, yum.
Yum yum. Okay,
Nick from Collegeville. Collegeville sounds like Archie and Veronica lived there.
that's right.
Nick says, every fall my neighborhood has a block party we call Blocktoberfest. As the name implies, it's an Oktoberfest themed party and a great time. This year I volunteered to make the beer for the party. My neighbor and I made 10 gallons of an Oktoberfest-style lager in August and let it lager in my fridge until the end of September. I took a few samples along the way and it was a fantastic beer. About a week before the party, I put both kegs in my kegerator to carbonate them and get them ready to serve. The next morning, I went down to the basement and it smelled a bit like beer. Common theme. I thought, must have spilled some yesterday. I checked over by the bar and it looked okay and didn't give a second thought. 3 or 4 days went by before I went into the basement again. Well, you can imagine what I found. This time the smell of beer was much stronger and there was a steady drip coming out of the kegerator all over the floor, onto my brand new carpet in the recently finished basement. Turns out I didn't put my ball lock disconnect back together properly after cleaning it and leaked 5 gallons of beer into the kegerator and all over the floor. After several minutes of yelling and cursing, I started to clean it up, hoping to do so before my wife figured out what I'd done. Another common theme.
Common theme, yeah.
We should have a bingo. Injury from glass,
Yeah.
middle of the night, smell of beer, wife not knowing. Fortunately, there was still one keg left for the party. We bought another commercial keg from a local brewery, and the party was still a blast. I steam cleaned the carpet, and it survived as well. But now every time I keg a beer, my wife makes me check the kegerator at least twice a day until the beer is gone. Well, thanks, Nick. Jason from Arcadia, California. I just started listening about 3 weeks ago. I've been listening backwards, and I've been listening backwards and have made it to last year's disasters. I've already learned a ton of information. As for my disaster, earlier this year I was trying to multitask while mashing my grains. It's another theme, multitasking.
Yeah.
While I was letting the mash rest, I started sanitizing my glass carboy. I grabbed the neck in my left hand and started to lift it to shake the sanitizer around. As I tried to slide my right hand underneath, the carboy slipped. It touched the concrete and shattered over my right hand.
Oh, yikes.
Oof. Instantly, my fingers started bleeding. I called to my wife to tell her I needed her to take me to urgent care and wrap my fingers with paper towels. As she came back to the back patio to tell me she was ready to take me to urgent care, I told her, "Okay, but I need 15 minutes." I wanted to get to the end of the mash.
Well, one must have one's priorities.
That's right. She did not find this amusing, but we waited, and I started to drain into my boil kettle. At urgent care, we were bumped to the front of the line due to the amount of blood present.
And the pale complexion.
That's right. 2 hours later, and 7 stitches across 2 fingers, I was back home.
He waited for 7 stitches?
He was almost done with the mash.
Well, okay.
15 minutes.
All right.
I didn't want to ditch the beer I had started, so I heated water and started the sparge as normal. The beer turned out okay, but I learned a valuable lesson. Never pick up a glass carboy without some sort of handle or hauler. Thank you so much for your show and the wealth of knowledge you're able to lend. Thanks, Jason from Arcadia. Now we're sponsoring the show this year.
Yes, we are.
Steve's Brew Shop and Basic Brewing. We're the sponsors this year. But I have a brew hauler left over from last year that I'm going to send to Jason.
He deserves one.
Yeah, so that that'll be either. And plus, he had the most blood loss.
Yeah, so far he's got the highest injury.
That's right.
In the injury index. If you got a quadruple bypass waiting on the secondary, then he'll win. But at the moment, Jason wins.
If the brewer says, "Wait, is that defibrillator going to short out my brew pot?"
That's right.
Then we know. Jeff says, I have to admit, I have listened to the annual disaster show with a certain amount of smug enjoyment in the past few years. I've had my share of things go wrong, but in recent years, nothing has happened that worth writing about. That's another theme, people say.
Yeah.
These things don't happen to me. I'd think, as you talked about one thing after another going haywire, I've learned my lessons, I thought. Not so much, Jeff says. Most of my brew days are really brew evenings. I'll work from home, start water heating in the electric hot liquor tank just after lunch, and late afternoon I'll take a few minutes away from the keyboard to mash in. Then I'll work for another hour or so, sign off, and start running off. One day this past August, I was having trouble signing off. One thing after another kept coming up. And to make things a little more hectic, plans had changed, and my wife was going to be home for dinner unexpectedly early. I was running back and forth between the laptop, the kitchen, and the garage, where I had a foreign extra stout mashing. I'd Vorloft started the runoff and had the sparge water draining into the mash tun. After verifying my water was going into the mash tun at the same rate the wort was flowing out, back to the laptop, then into the kitchen, and then back to the garage. In my frantic multitasking, I'd somehow neglected to ensure the valve on the kettle was closed, and so I discovered who knows how much thick, rich, dark, sweet wort on the garage floor. I said more than a few words that you won't read on your show, and that's when my wife arrived to discover the mess. She took over dinner and I cleaned up. After about 15 minutes, I realized that I could take at least some consolation from the event. I'd have a good story to send to Basic Brewing at the end of the year. Well, there you go. And the batch that I rebrewed a few days later turned out great and won gold at the Dixie Cup.
Wow.
Yeah, all's well that ends well. Cheers, Jeff. Cecil from Tampa, Florida. He says, sorry, it's sort of a two-part story of buffoonery.
I like it already.
My brother-in-law had bought me a homebrew kit that was an all-grain IPA, so I eagerly started putting it together in our kitchen. It was only a little 12-pack kit at the most. My wife wasn't nearly as excited as I was. She nervously hung around the kitchen, watching me brew, and quickly swept in behind me to clean up any spilled wort, boilovers, and whatnot, furiously wiping here and there and occasionally barking out orders. I personally thought things had gone well until a couple of days had passed. Melanie announced to me that I'd burnt a hole in her new glass stovetop during my brew day. Without thinking, I quickly stated, how do you know that wasn't you? You do 99.9% of the cooking, so odds are good it wasn't me. Without missing a beat, she quickly pointed to the marble tiled floor in the kitchen and said, well then, how do you explain that? There on the floor was a nice semicircular stain of IPA wort from my brewing bucket. For all further brew days, I was kicked out of the house and banished from the kitchen. My new domain was the garage, which now justified my purchases of a Blickman burner and chest freezer that had been turned into a dedicated fermentation chamber.
Again, with the upgrade in equipment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Bingo. Fast forward a year, and I have now upgraded from bottling to kegging. It was an extremely hot and humid day, and I was new to the kegging process. I had run PBW followed by water and Star Sand through my keg. It was now empty, but full, with a light pressure of CO2. So right before bottling, I decided to purge the tank and unseal the lid to start filling my keg. For some reason, I couldn't push the keg lid into the keg to move it around so I could take it out. So I just applied more force, a lot more force. Boom! The lid gives way, a cloud of CO2 escapes the keg, and I'm a little stunned by what happened. Always let the pressure out. I'm not sure what I did wrong, but everything looks good, so I decided to start filling my keg. But before I do, I realize I'm dripping sweat all over everything, and I don't want to contaminate my beer. I decided it's nice and cool inside the house, and Mel's gone to work. She'll never know.
Oh, boy.
So I drag everything inside and put it in by the French doors and go back out to the back patio. I fill my keg and put the lid back on and start to pressurize it. For some reason, beer is spurting out of the lid and all over the windows and a good bit of the living room.
Oh.
I stop, undo the lid, readjust it, and start over. Same result, beer spurting everywhere. Shamefully, I must admit, I think I tried one more time to reset the lid with the same result before I decided to take an in-depth look at the problem. Seems my O-ring for the lid is missing. Oh yeah, there was that big bang. It must have come off and then is probably lying somewhere outside in the garage area. After an extended search, I can't find the O-ring. In case you're wondering, yes, I had not started any sort of serious effort to clean up anything inside yet because I need to seal this keg and not have it exposed to oxygen for very much longer. After a little thinking, I decided it might be at the bottom of the keg. I re-racked the beer into my bucket, so much for oxygen exposure.
Yeah.
Re-racked the beer into my bucket, and lo and behold, there's my O-ring at the bottom of the keg. I fish it out, clean it up, and re-rack the beer into the keg. It seals fine now, and I'm looking around the sticky drying work all over the floors and windows. I managed to get everything cleaned up and put away before Melanie gets home, but I realized the whole room smells like cleaner. Maybe I should pop a bag of popcorn and let it burn. That'll cover up the smell of anything. In the long run, I just fessed up and begged for forgiveness. I've been allowed back in the house for some tasks, but spend most of my time in the garage. Oh yeah, the beer turned out great.
How can that be? How many beers have we heard about that should just be completely ruined?
It should be awful.
It just shows you that beer's just not that hard to make. I mean, it's got to be the answer.
Is that it?
Well, not for me.
Thanks, Cecil.
Yeah.
Here's Mark from the Mount Si Homebrewing Society. We went to a Mount Si Homebrewing Society meeting when we went up to Seattle, remember?
Yep, I do.
When Zot O'Connor was taking us around?
Yes.
Mark says, hope things are well down in Arkansas. Greetings from the Pacific Northwest again. Looking forward to seeing you in Portland next June.
We'll be there.
Yay. I have another disaster story to share with you, this time without broken glass. Oh, yeah, Mark was the one that, I think he had like a 3-part story last time with broken glass at every stage of the... Mark says, I brewed a really nice American brown using one of the AHA Big Brew recipes that was created by a local home brewer here in Seattle named Mark Brown. It's Buck Snort Brown. It took a silver at NHC about 10 years ago. I did my usual set and forget carbonation after cleaning one of the lines in my keezer, and after 10 days decided to sample the beer for carb level. I drew half a pint and noticed a distinct metallic taste in the finish. Figuring that it was just something in the line, I ran out a pint and dumped it and tried another sample. Same thing. Had my wife try, and she noticed it too. So being the engineer type who's guilty of overthinking almost any simple problem, my mind wandered to thoughts of a depassivated brew kettle. Since last time I brewed, it really made a concentrated effort to thoroughly clean the kettle. I had used Barkeep's Friend, which you use to actually passivate as a paste, so I blew that idea off. I recall from my BJCP training that metallic taste in beer can originate from anything metal touching the wort, but occasionally from bad storage of malt. Neither of those rang a bell. Since this was a beer for my church auction, bidding juice, it's what you get people to loosen up their pockets. I figured, what the heck, they probably won't notice it. Well, the day of the auction came around, and it was time to pull the keg from my keezer. I used Sankey connectors, and when I unhooked the tap, beer foamed out around the edge of the tap. I thought that was unusual and got a towel to dry off the tap head and the fitting. Then I noticed where the metallic taste was coming from. In order to flush a Sankey tap, there is a small floating ball inside the tap that has to be restrained in order to push solvent through the line to allow for cleaning. Normally you use what looks like a loop of metal with a wire nut in the end to hold the line open. In my case, I was lazy and grabbed a 16D nail off my workbench and pushed the nail into the end of the tap. I had cleaned the line and simply reconnected the tap to the keg with the nail still inside the tap. What had created effectively was a 16D Randall for the beer that flowed across the tap.
Yeah. Wow.
I removed the nail, reconnected the keg, and the metallic taste was gone. So not a true disaster, just another reason for Zot to give me the business at our next Homebrew Club meeting. Thanks,
But you
Mark.
know, what I like about that story and all that came before and all that came after is these are disaster stories, but they're also educational.
Yes.
They're very enlightening. They're very illuminating.
That's right.
I'll let it go at that.
Yeah, don't do these things.
Don't do that.
Curtis from Johannesburg, South Africa. I didn't know our signal. We must have a strong...
Well, we pointed the transmitter.
The tower.
Yeah, it's on top of Mount Kessler. And it can go all the way to Hawkeye, Pixley, and Johannesburg. Now,
If you put tinfoil on your aerials
well, I put bed springs
on the roof.
on the roof. Yeah, you pick up anything.
Rest in peace, Roy Reed. Curtis from Johannesburg, South Africa. My biggest brewing disaster this year, meaning he's had more than one.
That's right.
My biggest brewing disaster this year came on my one brew where I really needed everything to go smoothly, but of course it did. That's how these things go, right? Now, being a home brewer, I thought the perfect table favor for guests at our wedding would be a nice bottle of homebrew, and my fiancée agreed. So what could possibly go wrong? I wanted something special, so I decided on a good old wee heavy, partly for the great beer style it is, partly for the great name. My brewing method is brew in a bag, and I use a 50-liter electric urn for all my batches, and I was expecting a straightforward and uneventful brew day. I'd used the urn plenty of times before, and it had never given me any hassles, so again, what could possibly go wrong? Cue ominous music. Halfway through, the day was going smoothly, the mash had gone well, my numbers were all good, I hadn't forgotten any important ingredients, I hadn't burned myself, things were looking good. But then, while heating up the wort for the boil, I heard the dreaded click of an electrical component cutting out. I waited for a while, and the element eventually kicked back in. Hooray, I thought. That could have ruined my day. 2 minutes later, and the element cut out again. Oh no, the boil dry sensor was acting up and wouldn't let the element run longer than a few minutes at a time. How was I going to get 35 plus liters to the boil without a working urn? After trying to let the urn recover for 45 minutes and trying again with no success, I ended up having to decant 8 liters each into my 2 biggest pots and trying to boil those on the stove for a while before throwing the boiling wort back into the urn and repeating this process for the next couple of hours. This resulted in many, many burns to my hands, arms, everything.
Wow.
All while the urn just kept the wort warm with its mocking on-off ticks. Eventually, I ended the brew day between 11 and 12 p.m., late night, hoping that I'd boiled enough wort to get the right flavor profile for the beer. Exhausted and without more than enough headspace in the fermenter, I decided I didn't need a blow-off. The day had been long enough without having to worry about that. Needless to say, 2 days later, my garage was a shower of yeast and beer, with my fermenter resembling a science school project. More work to try to rescue this cursed beer. I rushed to try and replace the airlock with a sanitized blow-off and spent the next few hours washing every single surface in the garage. That should be another box to click on the bingo. Washing surfaces. I expected the beer to be ruined between the catastrophe during the boil and the massive blow-off where I thought it might get infected. I'd resigned myself to defeat. I pushed on, though, and after bottling and conditioning the beer, thankfully, it still tasted pretty good. Some of the dark caramel flavors weren't quite there, but still a good beer. Hallelujah, we might have had many unimpressed wedding guests otherwise. So congratulations, first of all, on the nuptials, on the wedding, and then congratulations, Curtis, on the good beer.
That's brave, brewing a big, complicated beer to serve at your wedding.
Yeah.
That takes a special kind of kahuna.
Cojones.
Kahone. Kahuna's in Hawaii.
That's right.
That's right.
Andy says, on Sunday, December 3rd, after a meeting at the brewery I work part-time at, I get home and receive a call from my wife that she and her 2.5-year-old daughter are at Grandma's house. I ask when she'll be home, and she says in about 4 hours or so, yes, I can brew. So that's another thing. You have the home alone. You're home alone.
Famous last words.
I quickly gather my equipment together. I brew on a commercial induction cooktop in my small apartment. Kettle, cooktop, pump, brew bag, check. I begin heating my strike water and let it run until my thermometer alerts me that it's time, that it's up to temp. I gather my grain, hops, and various additions. Beep, beep, beep. Yes, it's up to temp. Mash in with no issue and get the pump running. I turn off the cooktop and let it recirculate while I go prep some sanitizer in a 6.5-gallon bucket. I pull the faucet from the sink and drape it over the apron of the sink and into the bucket. Turn on the warm water and put in an ounce of sanitizer and quickly run back to check on the mash. It's 10 degrees over temp. I quickly run to the fridge to gather my ice packets and toss them in the mash and stir it to help keep it cool. I feel relieved. I got it back down in just a couple of minutes. I reach for my sanitizer bucket and quickly realize it's not next to me. Oh no, I'd left it in the kitchen unattended for a little while and it definitely overflowed.
Oh boy.
A lot. I had to use all the towels in the house to clean it up quickly. I will say, I don't think my kitchen tile has ever been so clean. Don't tell my wife, I like brewing inside. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
So it turned out well because the kitchen was clean.
Everything's fine.
Ryan says, I'm a huge fan of the radio and video podcast and look forward to them every week as my study break, currently in medical school in Virginia. 6 months ago, I only drank Busch Light, and now I'm a home brewer, largely in part to finding your videos on YouTube.
Woo!
I just bottled your 15-minute pale ale that I bought online from Steve's Brew Shop, and it is delicious. Looking forward to making another batch of it soon because I'm sure it won't last long over Christmas break. It was an extremely easy brew day and a great kit to get into home brewing. It was only my second batch. Just wanted to let you know that I love what you and Steve do and hope you keep the podcast going. Have a great holiday season. Oh, wait, that's not a disaster.
That's not a disaster.
How did that get in there? That's a shameless plug.
Shameless.
How did the shameless plug get in there? In the stack of things.
It's a testimonial.
How did that... That was purely accidental. I'll have to edit that out.
Do that later.
I thought we needed a break from the disasters.
Yes.
A little positive.
That's steve'sbrewshop.com.
Nicholas says, I have another story for you. Just happened the other day when a friend of mine and I brewed a 14-gallon brew-in-a-bag batch of barley wine. Well, tried anyway. Me. So, Scott, there's a lot of grain in this recipe. How much exactly? Scott, 57 pounds of Maris Otter and 5 pounds of crystal. But don't worry, my new pulley system will help us lift the grain to drain above the pot. Me. You tested that, right? Scott, of course. I suspended my son from it. He weighs 160 pounds. That's more than the grain. We'll be fine. Me. Okay, sounds good. I'll start filling the pot. 20 gallons of water, right?
This is the kind of engineering story I just love. Whenever you suspend your son from the pulley to test it,
Yeah.
you know the bridge is solid.
Yeah, if the pulley comes out of the ceiling and hits your son on the head, that's no big deal. You don't want to drop the grain.
No.
Me. Okay, sounds good. I'll start filling the pot. 20 gallons of water, right? Scott. Yep, my new Blickman burner will heat it in no time. Me. Okay, water is at strike temp. Let's add the grain. Scott. Wow, just enough room. Just made it. Even in the 30-gallon pot. Me. Hey, Scott, how much weight can the burner legs hold? Scott. You know, I'm not sure. Probably crash.
Oh, boy.
And there went 20 gallons of water and barley all over the driveway. The burner legs buckled under the weight, so he has to get new ones. Apparently the legs only hold 170 pounds. Should have had his son. No, we still would have been all right. We estimated we had about 225 pounds on there between water, grain, and pot. Lesson learned. The pulley works, though.
Wow.
Thanks, Nicholas. See, I thought the pulley was going to come out of the ceiling.
Yeah.
That's what.
That read like a script.
Yeah.
Like he was writing a Murphy Brown.
It's been a long time since you watched TV.
It has been.
Greg from Iowa City, Iowa. On a cold Iowa day, I was excited to brew with the new kegel I got from a friend, new quote-unquote kegel I got from a friend who had decided to get out of brewing. Moved from an 8-gallon brew kettle to 15 gallons. Now I can get that full boil without too much worry about boilover. Woohoo! Because it was cold out, I brewed in the garage instead of on the patio out back of our walkout basement. No problem. I've done this a number of times with my old kettle. I'll just boil the wort, then carry the kettle downstairs to my water source to chill. It wasn't until I went to pick up the kegel after the boil that I realized the error in my thinking. A keg is a lot heavier than thin-walled stainless pots. Hey, I'm still strong enough. Well, I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I'll just have to tough it out and get this wort to the chiller. I made it to the entryway and had to sit the kegel down. That's when I noticed a funny plastic smell. Plastic? Have I already ruined my beer? Oh well, got to move this wort quickly. Only had to sit it down 2 more times, once at the top of the stairs and then again at the bottom. That's when I realized what the smell was. Burning plastic on the linoleum floor and the carpet at the bottom of the stairs.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, I'm in trouble now. Fortunately for me, I have a very understanding wife. We have been planning on pulling up the flooring and putting in wood floors and just never got motivated enough to get it done. Well, now we had motivation. Burnt floor at both entrances to the house and the bottom of the stairs. $10,000 later, we have new floors. I have a wall hanging with a piece of burnt linoleum in my brewery to remind me to think about what I'm doing. And I have a great name for my brewery, Burnt Circle Brewing.
Wow. And you thought Utopias was expensive.
Needless to say, I don't brew in the garage anymore. Thanks, Greg. Burnt Circle Brewing. That's awesome. And he sent a picture of the burnt linoleum.
Yeah. Wow.
Philip says, a few months back, I've brewed a 9% ABV pitch black porter, named the Midnight Porter. It was a small batch I brewed in my Mr. Beer fermenter. I used the yeast cake of a 4-gallon maple amber. It sat inside a container inside my master bathroom shower to ferment. One early morning around 3 a.m., my wife woke me to ask what that noise was. I heard a loud whistling or hissing. I shot out of bed with a guess as to what it was, again, in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. I ran to the bathroom and opened the shower door and ripped off the top of the container. I had found the noise. I then hastily went to remove the lid off the Mr. Beer fermenter. As I touched it, it exploded.
Ooh.
The top came off and blew Porter Kreuzen all over my face and the shower. Luckily, it was in the shower. I left the top off and Kreuzen rolled out of the fermenter for a day and a half.
Wow.
I did end up bottling about 1.5 gallons. It was delicious.
That's what counts.
And I have some bottles cellaring at this time. By the way, the yeast was a Belgian dry Abbey yeast. So the Mr. Beer fermenter, it's got the screw-on lid now. Mm-hmm. And instead of an airlock, it has these little channels cut in the threads.
Yeah.
Well, I guess those got clogged up with the Kreuzen and stuff. Boy, I bet that was quite the wake-up at 3 a.m.
I'd say so.
Thanks, Philip.
He was visited by Chris Kreuzen.
That was the ghost of beer's future.
That's right.
Brett says, it was my 5th batch of beer, and I was feeling pretty good about my brewing abilities. No major issues on brew days, and the beer always turned out pretty okay. As a step up for this batch, I started using a temperature controller and a wort aerator. I was excited to see how these new steps would affect the taste and quality of my homebrew. One night, my wife and I awoke to the sound of my temperature controller alarm going off at 4 a.m. Again, these things don't happen in the afternoon.
Again with the middle of the night.
Irritated, my wife doubly so, I went into the spare room concerned as to why the temperature would have gotten out of control after it had been so consistent in the past couple of days. Turned out the probe was reading the temperature of the floor. Thanks to an enthusiastic fermentation, the stopper, airlock, and long metal probe were all on the floor, and there was a nice new splatter pattern on my closet wall. Except for the back wall, my new suit caught most of that.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
I quickly sprayed the stopper/probe assembly with Star Sand and popped it back in. After a few minutes of early morning problem solving, I ended up rigging up a blow-off assembly with spare tubing and a sanitized water bucket. Luckily, it didn't seem to affect the taste of the American Pale Ale, and it was ready in time for my buddy's bachelor party. Needless to say, I won't be pushing my luck with 5-gallon batches anymore. Blow-off assembly every time. Thanks, Brett. I bet the suit smelled good.
Well, yeah.
On the way to the dry cleaners.
Is that gabardine?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It'll ride up with wear.
Yeah. That's right.
I'm free.
I'm free.
This is from Eric, who I had emailed with him. We were talking about in a previous email about how he hadn't had any disasters. And I said, boy, you better knock wood. That was on November 11th. On December 15th, I got an email from Eric saying, well, the gods have looked upon my conceit and arrogance poorly.
Or with glee.
For bragging about not having a disaster. I was kegging a nice Pliny clone with lots of late edition hops. As I was racking the beer over, it hit me. Strong vinegar smell.
Ugh.
Acetobacteria. Time for some new tubing and a deep clean. Merry Christmas and happy brewing. See there? You flew a little close to the sun there.
Yep.
I have in my hand. How long have we been doing this? How long have we been?
1 hour
talking?
and 4 minutes.
Woo!
And 9 seconds.
Well, I hold in my hand the final story.
The final story.
May a amorous camel find your sister appealing. Sam says, I wanted to share with you a brewing disaster that kept me away from our favorite hobby for quite some time, 15 years to be exact.
Wow.
When I was, age redacted, years old, I found a kit of Mr. Beer equipment, no ingredients, at a garage sale. I became very excited because I thought this was my ticket to fame with my friends because we were all definitely, totally, absolutely old enough to buy beer at the store. He's changing, redacting a little bit to protect himself. Did I say this was Sam? This is Sam. Okay. I researched the process and recipes online, purchased ingredients, and waited for an afternoon when my parents would be away to start brewing my first extract batch. I didn't think my parents would have been against my learning how to brew, but I do know that brewing incognito was far more exciting. Well, I started brewing just outside of cognito. Mm-hmm. When you brew incognito.
Yes, not the same thing.
On brew day, I dutifully scrubbed my mother's stock pot and all other equipment in the utility sink in the upstairs washing machine room. It was a little crowded in there, so I temporarily removed the hose that drains from the washer to the sink and carried on my merry way cleaning my gear.
Oh, I know where this is going.
You could probably guess where this is headed. As I was heating up the boil water in the kitchen, I started to hear the heart-stopping sound of water dribbling through the light fixtures.
Yeah.
I ran upstairs to find a small swamp in the washroom. It's like in the Brady Bunch. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Marcia.
Alice! Apparently, my mother had started a load of laundry just before she went out, and I had moved the washer drain out of the utility sink. I quickly replaced the drain hose in the sink and mustered every towel I could find. That's another thing. Every towel in the house. Mm-hmm. That's another bingo thing. Every towel I could find to mop up the spilled water. Once I had the laundry room under control, I ran downstairs to mop up the water that had made its way down into the kitchen. And holy boil over, Batman! The wort had vigorously boiled all over the stovetop.
Oh, God.
By sheer force of will, I was able to mop up the kitchen, scrub the stovetop, and get my first batch into the fermenter without parental detection. Wow, that's impressive. What
about the light fixtures?
They were dripping. That is a risky business level.
No kidding.
Recovery.
Yeah.
Fermentation and bottling went smoothly, and I was very excited to show off my creation to my buddies once the bottle conditioning was complete. We gathered to open the first bottle, and as the lid came off, up came a seemingly unending stream of foam.
Ah.
With the clarity of hindsight, I realized that my ingredients and priming sugar had been for a 5-gallon batch, but I was using a 2-gallon Mr. Beer equipment.
Ah.
I must have avoided a bottle bomb purely by luck or chance. Needless to say, the final product was quite strong.
Yeah.
It also didn't help that I didn't understand the important role of sanitization in the brewing process, and my fermenter lived next to the water heater, which led to some significant heat fluctuations.
Call it a farmhouse ale. It'll be okay.
These factors led to a footy, funkalicious quality. Footy Funkalicious. I loved their first album.
I did too. They were really good.
Not one of my friends could look past. In short, it was a learning experience. Like you said.
Yes.
It's a learning experience.
Yes.
So in the end, I accomplished close to everything that one can get wrong in a first batch. I hope that I can have got them out of the way. My first brewing experience had led me to falsely believe that it would always be that hard and produce results that didn't satisfy me. But like a good beer, with time I mellowed out and I came back to the hobby with the desire to learn throughout the process and to apply a more methodical approach. My first few batches after re-entering the hobby have been great and have had a boatload of fun making them. Thanks for producing an informative and entertaining podcast. It's been a fantastic resource for me, and I hope many others as well. Thanks, Sam. So,
great.
Never give up.
Never give up.
Just do a little more search.
Don't fail until you quit trying.
Well, wow. Thanks, everybody. That was 22 stories. I decided to read them all.
That's a bunch of stories.
It is a bunch of stories.
The last story reminded me when I was the editor of my college paper, and my photo editor forgot to turn off the faucet to the rinse tank. This is back in the days when you actually developed film.
Right.
That's how old I am.
Right.
Anyway, he forgot to turn the faucet off, and he left it running. We were on the third floor, of this building, and below us was University Relations, whom we reported on regularly. We flooded all their computers. It didn't happen once, it happened twice. Not a brewing disaster, but it still haunts me.
Our mutual friend of ours had a similar thing where he enjoyed imbibing and then taking a bath.
Oh, who doesn't?
And so this is when he was young, and he had a bathtub where the little overflow thing, which is supposed to, if you leave the water on, it's supposed to like carry the water away.
Yeah.
That was clogged, and so he took a nap essentially in the bathtub and flooded the downstairs apartment. The third time he did that, they kicked him out.
Yep, third time's a charm.
So there you go.
Yep.
Well, Steve,
another year,
and it will tap, click.
Right.
Yeah, get a real sound of. There we go. Get the Foley artist in here.
Yeah. Another year of successful, moderately passable shows.
Thanks a lot.
I just want to tell you what a great show you do, and I'm glad that I'm part of it. Thanks for another year of Basic Brewing Radio. I'm glad that we are able to do this together. Happy New Year, Happy Christmas. We probably won't see you again.
Yeah. We're taking next week off of posting the show, but then we'll I've got an interview with Peter Simons in the can. He's got a new book.
Beer Steinman's in the can?
Peter Simons.
Peter Simons.
From Australia.
Oh, yes, Peter.
He's got a new book out. That'll be the first show of the new year. And then we've got experiments with local homebrewers that we're going to evaluate and do. And there's like a, what do you say, 13%?
13% Imperial Russian Stout.
That we'll talk about. We helped brew.
Yes. That
we'll talk about. So there's lots of stuff coming up in 2018.
No kidding.
Oh, my God.
And Portland?
Portland in June.
My 20th wedding anniversary.
I love Portland in June. What about you?
I just love that movie. Yeah.
I love a Gershwin tune. How about you?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Thank you, James.
We'll see you next year.
Next year it is.
Thanks again to everybody who sent in stories, and to Steve for hanging out with me after a busy holiday Saturday at his shop. If you go to Steve's channel on YouTube, you can see an updated video tour of his shop that we shot the other day. And if you heard the letter or your letter on the show, you'll be hearing from me before long to arrange delivery of your goodies. Hey, don't forget about the gift certificate bundles from HighGravityBrew.com that we talked about at the beginning of the show, we meaning me. And if you talk to Desiree and Dave, please thank them for their support of this program. They are good people, and we want to support them too. No show next week. I hope that everybody has a wonderful Christmas or rest of the holiday season, and I hope that you have a healthy and prosperous 2008. This is retro. We're going back 10 years. Healthy and prosperous 2018. And we'll see you on the other side. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form at basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering, and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. Get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any DVD combo, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store as well. You can find our logbooks where you can track and log up to 50 batches of beer. Check all that out at basicbrewingshop.com. And don't forget you can also join the American Homebrewers Association or subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.